Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. It's one of your hosts, TV, aka TV on basketball, alongside my co-host Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
Bro, it's going great. TV, the postseason. We're almost
Ah,
here. We're almost here, man.
yes, 100%. The play-in starts in a week from whenever the episode is being posted, which is a Wednesday. The play-in starts a week from that day, so you know what's coming. The content's coming, and you already know that we're gonna have some awesome stuff that we're gonna talk about all playoffs long, whether it's on this podcast and on our socials. Man, we're ready for the postseason, and man, things are still going down to the wire with 1 week left. We still don't know a lot, man. There's still a lot to discuss. And we're going to be getting into those things in this episode and also in next week's episode. But man, today's episode is going to be really special, especially because it's our award show, man. Our award show. It's the big boy. It's the big boy episode. It's going to be an awesome one. You guys are going to really, really enjoy this one. But before we get into it, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our individual socials at the Knockdown J, at TV on Basketball. Both of the links will be down in the description below. And as for the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. And for all the wonderful podcast listeners on Spotify and Apple, leave your review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate all of your guys' support. Jay, are you ready to get into this action-packed episode, man? There's a lot to discuss.
Man, let's go, bro. We got a lot on the docket.
Oh, we 100% do. And, man, we have a topic first before we get into the awards. Some massive news has come out in the NBA. And luckily for us NBA fans, there's not going to be a lockout, at least for the next 6 to 7 years, because the CBA has agreed. A new CBA has been agreed with the Players Association and the NBA, announced earlier this week, with a lot of changes happening that have been included that is going to come into effect next season. Man, there's a lot of things to discuss. Jay, I'm going to throw it over to you. What are just some of the biggest takeaways from the CBA?
Yeah, man. So there's a lot of notable implementations. There's a lot of things that were brought up that I feel like are kind of important in terms of roster construction moving forward, as well as how teams plan to relegate not only their finances, but also kind of their team building moving forward in terms of what they decide to do. Obviously, some of the main things that come up are obviously the lowering of the age limit did not happen. Something that was huge, considering that was a big topic for the last couple of years. That's the reason why that affects team building, is because now you still are going under the normal traditional manners of going about identifying a draft prospect, right? And I think that's probably good for the NBA. As much as you'd like to get onto a young talent earlier than as early as humanly possible, I do think that at the end of the day, this is a business environment as well, right? So having a bunch of young guns flying around in the NBA is kind of a tough one. I think we also have so many other quote unquote minor leagues beneath the NBA that still provide financial support, whether it be the G League Ignite or even just all the things that are provided now with the new contract agreements through the NCAA. There's a lot of stuff that still allows these kids to make money without them having to necessarily rush to the NBA, right? The other thing that I feel like is kind of more important than anything is the cap on high payroll teams being one of those things that was really notable, because obviously this was what people were naming as the CBA that is the super team killer, right? This is the one where now the super teams kind of have to watch their pockets a little bit more, because the guys that are becoming available to be able to formulate these teams are not going to be able to make the kind of crazy money that they've made in years past, while still being able to be a part of a 3 and 4 all-star level squad, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's something else that's huge. And I think my third takeaway, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't give a dang about the in-season tournament. I could really care less. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Hey, wait, we don't know about it yet. It could be lit. It could be.
Yeah, I mean, hey, the play-in tournament kind of turned heads around too, so I won't get too crazy about it. But the third and most notable thing to me that kind of stood out was just the minimum amount of games needed in order to win a NBA award, which obviously can also coexist with the kind of episode we're doing today, right? Yeah. And I don't think we're going to use this criteria as a part of this episode, but I think it is something that does help create a little bit more of a refined criteria in terms of being able to select an MVP. So the 65 game minimum is something that I think is an interesting implementation. The question will be now, how many people are going to be gunning for that 65? I hope that this reinstitutes the love for completing an 82 game season and kind of trying your best to persevere through a full 82 as opposed to what load management has kind of done to the game through the regular season. So yeah, man, I think those are the three main things that stand out. Is team building is going to get a little bit more difficult because you're not going to be able to just throw money at guys based off the fact that your owner makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think on top of that, the age limit thing is also huge because I think that drafting still needs to be a level of art. And I think that comes down to being able to identify a guy throughout his progression. And that includes being in an environment like college or the G League or overseas. And then, like I said, the last thing, obviously, most importantly, I just feel as though 65 games is a good threshold. Might not love it, but I think it's a good start in terms of at least helping refine this criteria a little bit more for some of these awards.
Oh yeah, 100%. And there was a lot of changes that I like that the CBA has done. I mean, you mentioned most notably the 65 minimum games for awards. Perfect, absolutely perfect. It makes it so. I mean, we already know in terms of their contract incentives and stuff. All NBA, All Star, all this other stuff affects their pockets, and when stuff affects their pockets, they are encouraged to to play to that level. So that means people like Embiid, who probably in years past wouldn't even be able to qualify because of the amount of games he's missed. It's something to look out for. Maybe even if it means lowering the minutes per game, maybe it's just like to see if they're able to complete even closer to a full season. So that type of stuff is great. One thing you didn't mention as well, all NBA teams positionless.
That's a great one. That is a great one. TV, we've been talking about that for years, man.
We've been wanting this for years. And the fact that even in the All-Star game that they removed like the forwards, I mean they've changed the forwarding guards, which I still think they still have to change just to make that completely positionless as well. They did that change with the all-rookie teams a couple years ago. Why didn't they do it for all NBA? I don't know. But finally we get to see this happen. No more second and MVP voting being held to the all NBA second team. It's something that we love to see. Other things I like to that I want to talk about. You talked about the draft declaration age not being at 18 yet. One of the biggest reasons when I was reading through this article about the new CBA is that especially for this upcoming draft, the idea of like the so-called double draft was something that they had to look at, because if you really think about it, if you make this change going into not this draft, but of course next year's draft, that completely changes the whole outlook of the 2025 draft, right? Where like a lot of those guys who had to play a year in college would then declare for the 2024 draft, making the problem with the double draft, which means the amount of prospects that are going to be in that pool of players is massive.
Yeah,
absolutely massive. And I think that is going to like really hurt the chances of a lot of the guys who were affected from years before, like from like guys who were planning out their career trying to get into the NBA and stuff like that. So the idea of them, obviously I would still want them to get rid of the one and done rule, but I think like in terms of like the short-term future, I understand it. And besides that, you talked about like contracts and stuff. That's going to be absolutely massive. But one of the things I want to discuss, and this is going to be a huge effect, especially for my Toronto Raptors. I talked about this during the trade deadline special when we were deciding, especially when we were deciding whether OG was going to get traded or not. I mentioned how in his next contract, his contract can only be improved by 20% per year.
Yeah.
They improved it to 40%,
yeah.
which is a massive thing for people like him. They called this the Jaylen Brown rule because he wasn't able to get as much money from his second contract because of his team-friendly first-year contract. So that type of stuff, that's going to be very interesting. I'm not sure if that's still enough to sign OG, but that gives at least a little bit more leeway for the Toronto Raptors and for other teams who are put in a similar scenario. So that's very interesting. And one more thing I want to discuss about the CBA. Have you seen about the trade restrictions? I mean, what's crazy about these trade restrictions is that the whole idea of trading like 4 unprotected first-round picks into the future, trying to get all these picks and stuff, they've lessened that because you can only trade 6 years into the future. And if you take into account the Stepien rule where you can't trade in back-to-back drafts, that only means 3 unprotected first-round picks. So they're trying to change the trade market. They're really trying to see like another thing they were trying to do is like trying to look at the amount of like salary being taken back by teams with like a lot more cap space and stuff like that. So you're gonna see trades be a lot more intricate over the next 4 years, which is something that the CBA tried to do here. But at the end of the day, if you look at like just like the whole list and everything, I think it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it, and just the fact that we were coming up to the expiration. I believe it was. I'm not sure if it was the end of this season or the end of next season. The fact that we don't even have to think about a lockout, which we had in 2011, is fantastic, and I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I think just to kind of expound upon a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, I feel like there's still going to be pushback about certain things, right? Obviously, the in-season tournament is probably the most questionable of everything that was implemented, but it was a lot of player-friendly stuff also that was included, right? The fact that players are also able to put stock equity into the teams directly, which there's kind of a conflict of interest to a certain degree that's implemented in that, but I think there's kind of a separate fundage where if you're going to invest in teams, it's multiple teams within a same account fund, not necessarily you investing in the team you're in directly by itself. Also, WNBA teams, similar thing. Just something else that kind of like popped up that I also think was kind of interesting was like the increase in two-way contracts. The thing that has been super impressive over the last couple of seasons is the ability for guys to come out of the G League when the NBA needed them the most, right? So especially that COVID season, the guys that come out of the G League and come in and produce at a really high level, being able to increase the amount of two-way guys you could have on your roster is big time, because that allows you to be able to reach down into that pool, and we can see a handful more guys come up from that level and produce and get NBA contracts like GP2, like Duncan Robinson once upon a time, and so on and so forth. Gabe Vincent falls into that pocket. Max Strus falls into that pocket. There's a handful of guys that ever since that COVID year have really kind of brought a new light and brought a new respect to, I think, the G League, and has kind of in a way brought a new respect for the two-way contract in itself, because I feel as though now having this setup also institutes the idea that the G League truly is the elite funnel system to the NBA. I think that college is still going to be viewed in a very high regards on a national level, but I think in terms of its translation to the NBA with more two-way contracts, that's going to allow more guys through the G League portal to allow themselves to maybe be able to get engaged with real NBA action depending on the construction of their team. That's something that really helps build up the game and builds up the G League, which they desperately need, because I think at the end of the day, the G League is profitable when you invest in it. And that's why from its transition from the D League to the G League now, we've seen so much come from it. And now I think now that we've seen it sprinkled throughout so many rosters in the league as it is, the impact that the G League has had on now main rosters, I think now they're being awarded properly, and it's through a CBA like this, and I think that's huge as well.
Yeah, just a lot more opportunities in the league, which is absolutely what we love to see. We love to see like more of these guys come in, give them a chance, because we've seen, like you said, mentioned players like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, even someone like Austin Reeves comes to mind in terms of him like starting off I believe he started off in the G League as well. So it's great to see like these guys and just get these type of opportunities as well. One more thing before we have a chance to move on. They also changed the rule where you can have more than two Supermax guys on a team now. Because if you remember from back in the day, the Boston Celtics weren't able to trade for someone like Anthony Davis because they had Kyrie Irving on the roster, who occupied that veteran Supermax spot the same as Anthony Davis. Now they dropped the restrictions, so it's fair game now. So you can have people like Steph Curry, as a hypothetical, him and just to give another Supermax guy at the top of my head, Joel Embiid, for example. Those two are Supermax guys. You could both have them on the same team now. They're not going to be in each other's way in terms of their contracts. So that means more possibility for trades. It feels like a lot more freedom with this. And also, I just, like you mentioned before, the aspect of getting like kind of the super team killer, being not having the salary cap increase by massive amounts every year. I think they capped it at only 10%. Because, man, if you remember 2016 when it jumped up by like 32%, we saw some like ridiculous contracts, man.
Shout out Mozgov and Luol Deng, who just finally stopped eating off those contracts like this year.
Oh man, I remember like waiting till midnight to see some of this news, and the fact that the first deal announced was Timofey Mozgov, 4 years, $64 million, was amazing to me. Shout shout out to Chandler Parsons dude for finessing his way into a max contract as well. Shout out to Chandler Parsons. Well, that's not going to happen as much now. So I think that is something that we could like see as a positive. Maybe it hurts a bit of their pockets, but oh man, these teams really need to know how to budget their money better sometimes. And I think like yeah, at least the CBA is able to address that. But yeah, all in all, I think the CBA has been like a massive plus, and in terms of the inter season tournament as well. I mean, they've made the play-in tournament like one of the most watched things on TV. Maybe this in-season tournament is gonna do the same. And for context, it's not gonna add any more games to the season. I think only for the two people who make it to the finals, it's only one extra game. So instead of 82 games, they play 83. But besides that, everyone's playing 82 games, so it's not really gonna affect the amount of games in the season unless you're made to the finals. So that should be interesting as well. But Jay, time to move past the CBA, and we're gonna get into the juicy stuff, man. We are talking NBA awards. Finally made it here. We're at the end of the season, and man, it was tough, man. It was tough picking out like some of these winners.
Yeah, bro. I think this is a season where the parity really kicks in because you have to value how a guy produces in conjunction to his value to his team a lot more, right? Because
Yeah,
especially when you factor in the crazy statistical spike that we've seen across the board. We talked about this very early when we first started the podcast that the statistical jump across the board for this season has made it where like 20 point per game scorers are growing on trees. And so now you have to
yeah,
like sit down and really contextualize, okay, like they're scoring 20 points a game, but what like in what fashion, right? In what context? And these are all things that kind of add up. And I think those supplementary roles, like are you an elite level 3-point shooter? Can you create for yourself, creating for others, elite level on both ends, or are you an elite defender? Like all of these are different things that I think we have to take more accountability for in terms of making our decisions in ways that we didn't do in years past. And it's definitely made the decision a little bit harder, but
hmm
I think in the same light, I feel like we have a pretty decent consensus about where we stand.
yeah, for sure. And I think it's gonna be, well, it's gonna be a tough choice, but man, it's a lot of like close races for these awards, and I think there's gonna be a lot of great discussion because I don't think it's gonna be like a straight sweep for any of us. There's gonna definitely be some disagreements here, and that's exactly what you love to see. Jay, are you ready to get into this first award?
Let's get it, man.
Let's get into it. And we're going to start. Let's start with the first award with the first year players. We're heading to Rookie of the Year. And by the way, before the show started, me and Jay have come up with a list of 3 players for each award. So these are our 3 candidates, and we're able to choose from this pool who we believe are the winners. And as for the Rookie of the Year award, Jay, our 3 candidates for this, we have Walker Kessler of the Utah Jazz, Jalen Williams, J-Dub of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Paolo Banchero of the Orlando Magic. Jay, how are you feeling about these candidates for ROI?
Man, they are all candidates for this award for completely different reasons. I think that when you look at it, Walker Kessler has played so well in the defensive end that he has kind of overshadowed Rudy Gobert within his own trade, where I think we have officially dubbed this the Walker Kessler trade in terms of
Yeah,
just how much he's been able to produce. And oddly, he's done it in Rudy Gobert like fashion for the Utah Jazz, mind you,
yeah,
with just being an elite level shot blocker for them. His offensive game is still coming along nicely, but I think it's one of those things that he still kind of has to develop over time. That's the pride of being a rookie, though. And I think the fact that he is an all NBA caliber defender at the center position already is something that makes him really stand out within this class, unlike guys like maybe a Ben Mathurin or like a Jaden Ivey that we didn't put on this list because of the fact that, yes, they bring some offensive prowess, but does their offense mean as much or look as good as a Walker Kessler has looked in terms of what he's done defensively? For J Dub, his case is he's probably arguably the, let's say, the 2B for
yeah,
the Oklahoma City Thunder. When you look at it, I think on any given night it's between him and Josh Giddey, who's the second best player on the Oklahoma City Thunder behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And mind you, he's doing it on a team that had very low expectations coming into the season after Chet Holmgren went down. And as of right now, they are at least in playoff tournament contention, which means they're still fighting for playoff potential. And if they make the playoffs, now you're the only rookie out of this three-man group that's going to be playing in the postseason. Being the second best player or one of the top three best players on a playoff team as a rookie is not something we say much on a year-to-year basis. And then you have Paolo Banchero, who may arguably, from a talent perspective and a production standpoint, be the best rookie this season, with the only flaw that's really hurting him being the fact that he doesn't have the efficiency stats that line up with the fact that he's playing so well from a counting standpoint. So everybody's got a really good case for really different reasons.
Oh yeah, 100%. In terms of like just these three candidates, I think just the variety in the way like they like are impactful for their team is great. It's not just like one cookie cutter um sort of like rookie of the year race where each of these guys are, just top scorers on each of their teams, most flashy or whatever. Each of these guys brings different value to their team. And I mean, of course, starting with Paolo Banchero being the number one guy thrusted into that role. And honestly, taking it very well, basically a 20 point per game scorer, and just him being the number one option on, to be honest, even especially over these like last few weeks or so, a pretty solid Magic team, all things considered. I mean, they're tied for 11th in the East, which we didn't think that they were going to be able to reach that point. Paolo Banchero being the number one option shows that his game does translate to somewhat winning basketball. He just needs kind of a better team around him. And just like his all around ability is just really good, especially on the offensive end. Jalen Williams, I mean, he wasn't in the conversation until the year 2023. But Jay, I have some stats for you for the 2020, just the calendar year 2023 from Jalen Williams. 16 points a game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals as a rookie on an Oklahoma City Thunder team, like you mentioned, is in the play-in race. J-Dub has had a massive impact on this team. Like you mentioned, him and Josh Giddey really just like go back and forth with the number 2 option as a number 2 option on that team. And honestly, for someone like J-Dub, the injury to Chet Holmgren really has like allowed him the opportunity to play a lot of games and like a lot more minutes, and B, I mean, just seeing that at least Oklahoma City Thunder is saying, look, we know what we have in this Jalen Williams. We still have to wait for our other rookie and Chet Holmgren. It is a very bright future for the Oklahoma City Thunder. You see a lot of like the pieces coming together, especially with Shea being the number one option as he is. He's playing absolutely fantastic, and you see someone like him really taking the step as a rookie. Very, very impressive. And then Walker Kessler. Like, something about the Utah Jazz, man, just knows how to use players like a Walker Kessler, like a Rudy Gobert. Doesn't matter how much money you're making, doesn't matter your resume. They're going to turn you into one of the league's best rim protectors. And they're going to make you one of the most intimidating inside presences in terms of on the defensive end. And that's what Walker Kessler has been showing all year round. Very good rebounder as well. And honestly, I mean, we didn't talk about all defensive teams and are all like when we talked about all NBA and all rookie, but Walker Kessler has a case to be put on that team as a rookie. So that tells a lot about the story. And man, he's going to be a great player for years to come. The fact that he has honestly made a bigger impact on the Jazz than Gobert has did on the Timberwolves is kind of rough, especially with the amount that the Timberwolves gave up to get Rudy Gobert. So having Walker Kessler in that position, even though he's not the most flashiest player, he doesn't put up the points like Ivy and Mathurin does, but his impact cannot be denied. Jay, any other thoughts, or should we get into this winner?
I mean, I think we said everything in terms of the 3 candidates. Like we said, there's a lot of diversity in terms of this group, and I think that's really good because I tend to feel like this is one of those awards similar to Sixth Man of the Year where it kind of feels like which rookie scored the most is kind of like the tail of the tape. And yeah. I feel like you can utilize that as a metric this year, I don't feel like it's the only thing that we're banking on in terms of trying to contextualize rookie of the year. I think it's still very factorable, but I don't think that it's the only factor. And I think the fact that these 3 guys in particular that we have on our ballot all have very, very different cases makes this award much more interesting than maybe it looked like in the beginning of the year.
100%. And with that being said, Jay, who do you have the winner for who is your winner for Rookie of the Year?
I hate this because of the fact that I feel like I'm positioning myself to go with what I feel like the consensus is, but I feel like the deeper I look into it, I'm getting more and more comfortable with it. I still feel like Paulo Banchero is a rookie of the year. I don't love it, and I feel like the splitting of hairs between him and Jalen Williams is getting closer and closer. But I feel like part of the reason why the Jalen Williams push is there is because a lot of people are in "what have you done for me lately" mode, and a lot of people are probably also bored with the idea that Paulo Banchero has been basically front running this award for basically the
The
entire season.
entire
So
year.
so with Jalen Williams picking up steam, I think there's people that are just simply trying to make it much more interesting than it actually is. But we have to be real. Paulo Banchero leads all rookies in points per game. He's top 5 in rebounds per game. He's top 5 in assists per game amongst rookies. He also is the only rookie amongst our group that is considered as a number one option on his team. He's also had to play relatively out of position in terms of his overall skill set, because you have to remember this is an Orlando Magic team that was without their point guards in a multitude of different ways, right?
Yeah.
Cole Anthony missed time, RJ Hampton missed time and also was traded at one point. Markel Fultz missed time. This team could not seem to consistently put a point guard on the floor. And even with that being the case, even when they got their point guards back, Paulo Banchero was not operating with a ton of spacing either, right? So that's another thing that was really interesting. And something else that just can't be denied, and it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, is the fact that throughout the entire season, Paulo Banchero has still been able to maintain this insane free throw attempts per game thing,
Yeah.
with the fact that it's 7.4 and he's shooting almost 75% from the line. Doing so, as a rookie, to be having that kind of insane, like, that level of insane respect to be able to get the calls, but also just be able to play with that level of physicality to create the contact and finish through contact like that. I think that that's just insane and cannot be overlooked, because if he's getting the whistle like this as a rookie, the more he fills out into his game, the more he continues to learn the savviness around being able to draw calls, create that contact, finish through contact. He's only going to become more and more dangerous. So to average 20 points per game right now with this kind of volume, right? And also to have this kind of insane level of free throw attempts in a season,
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes to show you that he's only kind of scratching the surface in terms of what he can do from a dominant standpoint. And I'm still on the train of, if you get Paulo Banchero a legitimate point guard next to him, it's going to create a lot more opportunity for him. And I think that they have the real chance to do that in some way or fashion through this NBA draft, where there's a ton of guards in this pool.
Yeah, 100%. And again, not to be boring, but who like he's running away with it. He's running with it. I'm going with Paolo Banchero myself.
Yeah.
I love the love for Jalen Williams. I love it, especially with like the Thunder playing as good as they are. Walker Kessler kind of in the same position, like an overachieving Jazz team. But when you honestly even look at the records, all three of these guys are separated by 4 games in terms of record, and all of them have had like massive impact on their team. But Paolo Banchero, man, 20 points a game, like we mentioned, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, as the number one option on a not like bottom feeder like Orlando Magic team. The fact that he kind of understands this game as a number one option, getting to the free throw line, being able to know his spots and like play this well offensively, is scary. It's scary for the league, and he's only gonna learn more as his career progresses. This is only year one, and he honestly just looks like the most like he looks out of all these guys. Maybe you could mention Walker Kessler, especially as an interior presence, but he doesn't look like a rookie on the court there. He looks like he's been there for a couple years. He understands like his role in the team, and he like tries to do it to the best of his ability. He does need to work on his efficiency. It's like 43% from the field, 30% from three, but that'll get better as time goes on. This is more of just a rookie thing. He'll get better at it as he continues to work on his game. But the case you can make like small cases here and there for the other two candidates, but at the end of the day, when you have someone's number one option dominating the way that he is, you can't really look past that. And even though like it does seem like a boring answer, sometimes the boring answer is just the right answer. And I think both of us agree. I mean, like we both agree here that Paolo Banchero should be the rookie of the year winner. Moving on to the next award, we're going to be heading over to the defensive side of the ball. We're going to be talking about Defensive Player of the Year, an award where last season, honestly, I don't know if you were surprised by this or not with Marcus Smart winning it, but First time a guard has won it in like what I think since Gary Payton.
Hmm.
But this year, man, in terms of our candidates, we have no guards here. It is a very much a big man dominated category. We have Bam Adebayo of the Miami Heat, Jaren Jackson Jr., Triple J of the Memphis Grizzlies, and Brooke Lopez from the Milwaukee Bucks. Jay, how are your thoughts on these candidates?
Yeah, man. So this one is really interesting because I think it comes down to just what do you value more, right? I think there's a lot that can really be taken in consideration between what being an elite shot blocker is, what being a versatile shot blocker and rim defender looks like, a guy who can step out on the outside and guard on the perimeter. That's more of like a BAM association. I just think that again, this is another one of those award races where I think that there's some flexibility between all three guys because I think that Bam Adebayo's overall malleability, where you can put him anywhere, whether it be on the perimeter, on the inside, post him on the nail, and have him guard the rim for you. All of these different things that he provides is great. It just unfortunately has not provided very much for the Miami Heat, and it's been an
Yeah,
eyesore to watch the Miami Heat this season.
yeah,
So it kind of overshadows how good Bam Adebayo has been defensively. But if you value the versatility that he provides, he definitely has a real shot in terms of this discussion. Brooke Lopez, far and away, is one of the best shot contesters in the NBA. I think he's running away with shots contested in the league this season. And I think that has to do with the fact that he is moving around and he's playing, center fielder behind a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. And in a weird way, you can make an argument that despite the fact that Giannis has been so good defensively this year, Brooke Lopez probably still is their best defensive player this season. And I think that's insane when you're talking about comparing a defensive 3 and D kind of guy in Brooke Lopez to an MVP candidate in Giannis
yeah.
Antetokounmpo, right? But I think that makes Brooks' case that much more interesting because for you to be the better defender than your MVP candidate, who arguably could be in the same pool as a defensive player of the year, it speaks volumes. And then
Mhm.
lastly, Jaren Jackson Jr., who as an individual defender has the best defensive rating in the entire NBA, right? Now, there's an argument that can be made that there is some weight that should be shifted in favor of Steven Adams, especially with what we've seen from them defensively in Steven Adams in his absence. But I think that it cannot be denied that as a shot blocker, as a guy who can just sit in the middle and make you fear attacking the rim, Jaren Jackson is that kind of shot blocker, that kind of rim defender that just makes you change how you play offensively. And so
Yeah,
that's something that has to matter when you talk about defensive player of the year, because if you have to schematically account for how impactful that guy is as an individual defender, that means he carries a lot of weight as a defensive asset. Jaren Jackson Jr. might be one of the best defenders in the league, and this year there's an argument that he is the best.
yeah, 100%. Each of these guys all contribute to like some of the best defenses in the league, and that's what you can kind of see with the Defensive Player of the Year award. If your team has one of the best defensive ratings, one of the best defensive seasons out of any of all the teams in the NBA, and you're the catalyst of that being like with these guys, then you're gonna have a good chance at the award. I mean, as much as the Miami Heat are an eyesore to watch, especially offensively, they're still one of the best defenses in the league, and Bam Adebayo is a big reason for that. I mean, his case maybe not as strong as these other two, but his versatility, especially on the perimeter, like you mentioned a lot of the stuff already, but his versatility defending the perimeter, still being one of the elite rim protectors in the league, makes him like one of the most kind of sought out like defensive players, one of the most respected defensive players in the league. So I guess, I mean, if you ask like NBA players in terms of some of the best defenders, you're gonna see like a lot of votes for Bam Adebayo just because of what he could do, kind of all around the court and not just as the rim protector of a team. Brooke Lopez, man, I mean, like I think like a huge like argument for him and what I've seen, especially like over like this past year in general, is that you've seen how the Milwaukee Bucks defense operates when he's not on the court from last year, being 14th in defensive rating, all the way to this season. It is night and day, and a
Mm-hmm.
big part of that. And look, Giannis played a lot of the season last year. There's a reason why he was an MVP candidate, but adding Brooke Lopez back into the mix making them the third best defensive team in the league. It just speaks volumes to how good he is defensively. The fact that he still leads I think he's still like one of the top in the leagues in terms of total blocks, even though he's not leading in blocks per game. In terms of shots deterred from the rim, he's one of the best in the league at that. Just being there and like letting the other great defenders in Milwaukee kind of be able to take chances, knowing that if they do mess up, they have one of the best rim protectors behind them. It's just such a valuable asset to have, and he has proven that this past year. And of course, Jaren Jackson Jr., the one guy I believe on this list where, like you mentioned, you have to avoid him. You just kind of have to, because even like empty lanes, when there's empty lanes, this guy is so freaking athletic. He can go from one side of the court to another and still knock that shit away. Like, if you remember that block on John Collins a couple weeks ago, oh boy, that was absolutely nasty. And that kind of encapsulates just how athletic Jaren Jackson Jr. is. He is like sneakily athletic, but also just like the amount of space he's able to cover as a rim protector. There's a reason why he's leading the league in block shots per game. And like you mentioned, defensive rating, the highest in the league. Absolutely fantastic for him. So you've seen what he can do on the court, and in terms of like highlight defensive plays, he has provided a lot of those throughout this past year. There's a good reason why he is one of the top candidates for Defensive Player of the Year. But Jay, lots of great candidates here. Who do you have as the winner?
I got Jaren Jackson Jr., bro. I love what he provides. I feel like the fact that the Memphis Grizzlies are still top 5 in defense, despite all of the turmoil that they've had on and off the court in terms of their overall productivity, I think is very notable. I think the fact that Jaren Jackson has actually been very available this season has also been very telling to me, because I think you look at it, these last 2 seasons in particular, where Jaren Jackson Jr. has actually been healthy and available for the Memphis Grizzlies, they've been much better defensively. That's no coincidence at all. But I think the fact that he is that impactful for them, for a team that's not walking around with a ton of defensive personnel, by the way, right? Desmond Bane has versatility. I think Dillon Brooks is a very good on-ball defender, but I don't think there's much elite defensive talent on the Memphis Grizzlies. They're more of an up and down pace and space team that likes to really kill you in transition. They're not a team that's hunkering down defensively in the half court. You look at a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, who I think the run is the race, I feel like, is way closer between Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brook Lopez than it is between those two guys and Bam Adebayo.
Yeah.
I think Bam Adebayo, unfortunately, is in a distant third place. But let's take a look at the Milwaukee Bucks and really contextualize it, right? They are one of the best defenses in the league. Give you that. Brook Lopez does have a ton to do with that, for sure, along with the fact that he's one of the best shot blockers / contesting big men in the league, like I mentioned earlier. But having Giannis Antetokounmpo helps. Having arguably the best defensive guard in the NBA and Jrue Holiday helps. Having a guy like Jay Crowder, who come in later on in the back half of the season, helps. Having a dude who's basically set to be a defensive guy that shoots the three at a pretty decent clip in Javon Carter helps, right? When a lot of your team is oriented towards having elite level defensive personnel, Brook Lopez plays a huge factor in being the anchor of the defense. But them being a number one defense has a lot to do also with the fact that they have a lot of flexibility across the roster in terms of the type of defensive personnel that they throw out on a night-to-night basis. And we had this conversation after the trade deadline between acquiring Jay Crowder, potentially getting Chris Middleton back, already having Jrue, having Giannis and Brook Lopez. They could arguably go into the NBA playoffs with the best defensive starting 5 of any team that goes into the postseason. Now, is it fair to count that against Brook Lopez? Not necessarily. But does it factor when you're splitting hairs between two guys of this caliber? I think it should.
Yeah, 100%. That is a very, very good pick, having Jaren Jackson Jr. there. This is the first award we're going to differ, because you have Jaren Jackson as your winner. I have Brook Lopez as my winner for Defensive Player of the Year. And look, like you mentioned, it is extremely close. If you go with either one of these guys, I have no problem with it. But my biggest knock against Jaren Jackson, I hate to do this. This has been a problem for him the last couple of years.
I knew it.
You know I was gonna bring it up. The fouls. It's the fouls. Oh, it's the fouls, man. And look, he is a phenomenal defensive player. I am not taking away anything from that. But 4 fouls, close to 4 fouls a game. I mean, this has been a problem throughout Jaren Jackson's entire career. There have been games in the playoffs where he had to be taken out of like early in the first quarter, early in the third quarter, because he just got himself into foul trouble. He gets way too jumpy, and as much of a great defensive player he gets a little bit excited in terms of trying to chase those blocks. And he's great at it. He's one of the best in the league at it, but that definitely does hurt him. And when you look at all the past Defensive Player of the Year winners, I just saw the stat right now. Only one other player has won Defensive Player of the Year while averaging under 30 minutes a game, and that was Michael Cooper back in the 80s. Every other Defensive Player of the Year
That's a great point.
Has averaged over 30 minutes a game, and there's a reason why he can't reach 30 minutes a game. It's because of the foul trouble. Yes, he's still one of the league's best shot blockers, but when you're limiting yourself to that amount of time because you're not disciplined enough to stay on the floor, that is something to go against your case. When you look at Brook Lopez, he is top 3 in contested shots per game. He is averaging under 3 fouls per game. When you look at his block percentages being close to 70%, all that, even though, like you mentioned, I do respect the case that, he has elite defensive players around him, not even discussing like potentially Chris Middleton getting back to an all defensive level, not even mentioning the solid defensive skills of like Joe Ingles on the perimeter as well. But his like ability to kind of, even like with these like great defensive players, like change the defense that much on a year-to-year basis kind of just speaks volumes. As much as a great like defensive personnel the Bucks have, it all falls on Brook Lopez to kind of make them elite. They could be middle of the pack without him, and they still have great defensive players. But man, when they're on the team, it goes from here to here, and I think that matters a lot in terms of this race. It's very, very close, but I still got Brook Lopez winning.
I definitely can't hate the choice. I want to make sure that I give Brook Lopez his respects because I don't want to disrespect him by saying, hey, you got 4 other potentially, solid / elite level defenders around you. So therefore, you should not be considered in this class. He's number 2 for me for a reason.
Yeah.
I also think that something that's interesting that you bring up about Jaren Jackson when it comes to fouls, because I saw it coming. That's kind of the biggest flaw for him. Yeah. But what's funny about that is it does kind of flow with the erratic style of the Memphis Grizzlies, right? The same way they play up and down and very chaotic offensively. Jaren Jackson Jr. is kind of the staple of how they act defensively in that same regard. And his ability to kind of fly around, be erratic, play with so much high energy is kind of what empowers the guys on the outside, especially Dillon Brooks, to be as aggressive as they are. Dillon Brooks and Desmond Bane are allowed to be so much more aggressive on the perimeter because of the fact that they know they have the kind of ground coverage and the kind of shot blocking behind them that Jaren Jackson Jr. provides. And of course, if they have Steven Adams as well, then watch out. Yeah. But I think a similar thing can also be – I think a similar case can be made for Brook Lopez next to Giannis Antetokounmpo when you talk about guys like Chris Middleton, Jay Crowder, Drew Holiday being able to press up and be much more aggressive. But I think that in your case, something that you make kind of apparent with your Brook Lopez case is Brook plays with a lot more control and it's a lot more balance. And I think that kind of caters more to what Milwaukee does, which Milwaukee kind of methodically takes you down, right? They're so physical as a team that they kind of beat up on you throughout the case of a 4-quarter game, and by the end of it, they out physical you. And Brook Lopez, as a mountain of the man, right, that he is, kind of represents that play style as well. So I think it's really interesting how their play styles very much mold to the identities of the teams that they play for. And in a way, I hate to kind of knock a player or uplift a player for that, but I think in a weird way too, that kind of in its own way should uplift them both because of the fact that they're able to be this elite within a scheme, right? While being able to be a part of a scheme, they're able to kind of supersede the scheme in their own ways. I think that's really cool for both of them. But I feel you.
Yeah, you can really go either way with this one. Again, if whoever they choose, not gonna be mad at. But you're literally splitting hairs between these two. They are both elite defensive players. Both definitely deserve a shot at this award. Next award we're gonna discuss is going to be the guys. We're gonna show love to some of the role players, the guys off the bench. We're gonna be talking about 6th Man of the Year, and once again we have three guys who are absolute buckets, and as our 3 candidates, we have Bobby Portis of the Milwaukee Bucks, Malcolm Brogdon of the Boston Celtics, and Emmanuel Quickley of the New York Knicks. Jay, it's not as like interesting as a 6th Man of the Year race in past, but you still got some good candidates over here.
Yeah, man, I think you make a great point that, like, honestly, six man of the year has not been as exciting as it's been in years past, honestly, and that's kind of the weird part.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that all of these guys are interesting in their own way. I'm gonna end up saying this a lot throughout the podcast, but unfortunately, this is the one area where I think they all have their own diversity, but this is definitely the one award where it really is a what do you like in a six man will tell you a lot about the six man that you choose. Because I don't think this is a year where you just say whoever scores the most points or whoever is the best six guy to come off of a top five team in the NBA is simply just the six man of the year. I don't think it's as cut and dry as it's been in seasons past, but I also think that the talent pool for six man of the year on the surface isn't as crazy as we've seen in years past either.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of these three nominees, I mean, it's not the points per game is not really separating them like as much. It's not like it's like a Jordan Carson year or a Tyler Hero year from last year, as per example, where they're just running away in terms of like scoring the most points in the coming off the bench. It's nothing like that. But each of these guys, man, I mean, they come off the bench, they are an absolute spark because of the team. Some guys more all around than others, some guys giving like a different sort of look than others, but they all play their role very great. Um, you could really go with either one of these. So, Jay, who would you have as your winner?
I got Emmanuel quickly for the New York Knicks, man. I just feel like he's been playing at a big time level for them. The New York Knicks have really relied on the fact that he's also stepped up like very, very well defensively, as a part of one of the top, 15 defenses in the league. On top of that, he's just been a serious spark plug. 14.3 points per game, 4.1 rebounds, 3.3 assists, shooting the ball relatively efficiently with 36.2% from beyond the arc. I mean, he's just doing everything that they need him to do. And I think it's interesting that they're able to kind of rely on so many small guards, right? The fact that Quentin Grimes has played a lot for this team, Emmanuel Quickly, Jalen Brunson, and yet they're allowing themselves to play so physical. And by doing so, they've been so good defensively while also being able to score with some of the best teams in the NBA. And Emmanuel quickly has a ton to do with that. I also think that the responsibilities that he's taken upon himself from last season to this season, there's a weird argument that you can make that like Emmanuel quickly should even be in like the most improved player race. Now, I don't think he cracks the top five. He obviously we'll get to it later, but he doesn't crack the top three for us. But he's a guy that when you look across the board, he just has become much more efficient, much while being much more assertive. And you throw on top of that he's having a legitimate impact defensively at the guard position. He is a dude who is in a weird way, I guess you could phrase it, doing it all for the New York Knicks. And a do-it-all guy for a playoff team, a top five playoff team at that, is a guy that I think should be heavily considered in a league where averaging 20 points per game just isn't as impressive as it used to be.
Yeah, for sure. None of these guys like really stuck out like we mentioned. Like we mentioned, not a lot like really kind of like separating them. But I have to agree with you here. My winner is going to be Emmanuel Quickly as well, and I think a big part of his case is his play, especially post All Star break, because his numbers, I have it over here, post All Star break, have been like next level in terms of like his productivity. 19 points a game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, almost 40% from three, 46% from the field. He has just been able to make himself more assertive to New York Knicks. Compared to the other six man of the year candidates, you can feel his presence the most. Sure, Malcolm Brogdon, when he comes in, he has a steady hand. He is just one of the more solid guards in the league. You could like rely on. You can trust him with the ball in his hands at the end of games, just on a game to game basis. Bobby Portis, like a very good, probably the best rebounder coming off the bench, very good scorer. But when it comes to Emmanuel Quickly, you can just sense his presence on the court. He makes himself known when he's on the court, and that type of ability, and especially over like the last month and a half or so, seeing him be able to kind of like find himself a role in the team where Jalen Brunson has taken a big jump, Julius Randle, and for him to figure himself out in like in a role in his team and still producing the numbers that he has, especially coming off the bench, I think has been very impressive, and I think it's just more like noticeable compared to the other guys that he is in the race with. And I think like his ability and his like scoring output and his effect is going to matter more to this team when it comes to the playoffs. Malcolm Brogdon, he has like some of the best, like he has the Jalen Browns, he has the Jason Tatums that he can rely back on. When you look at someone like a Bobby Portis, of course they have like Middleton, Drew Holiday, Giannis Antetokounmpo. In terms of the Knicks, can you trust RJ Barrett on a night-to-night basis? Can you trust Julius Randle on a playoff night-to-night basis? I don't know. So you like when you know that those guys could be kind of up and down for you in the playoffs, you're gonna need a constant force coming off that bench. And I think that Emmanuel quickly and his productivity coming to the playoffs means the most to his team in terms of this. So that's why I have him as my sixth-year Man of the Year award winner as well.
Yeah, I think just to put a bow on Emmanuel quickly too, you bring up the postseason, and you don't like to do this when you talk about
Yeah, of
awards,
course.
but it
Yeah.
is one of those things that I want to kind of touch on because it's important for the New York Knicks, and it's going to be something that we probably bring up in our preview for the NBA playoffs. But something that's really notable, TV, year after year, is that the New York Knicks have been trying to figure out that guard position in terms of trying to get a guy that can put legitimate pressure on the rim or shoot the ball at a high clip in order to create space and just give the New York Knicks another look in terms of what they can do production wise offensively outside of just give Julius Randle the ball and move out the way, right? Or
Yeah.
give RJ Barrett the ball and move out the way. In Kemp Walker, we've seen Derrick Rose, but this iteration of the New York Knicks, especially with Emmanuel Quickly's recent surge, the pairing of him, Jalen Brunson, like I said earlier, Quentin Grimes, Josh Hart being one of the best defensive rebounders at the guard position in the
Mm-hmm.
league is also a big time addition from just the amount of guard play and let's not say elite, but the amount of good to solid guard play that the New York Knicks have this season, I think is their biggest X factor going into the postseason because of the fact that this is the biggest element they were missing a couple seasons ago in that run that they ended up being the first of many to fall to the Atlanta Hawks, right?
Yeah.
They got exposed because they didn't have legitimate guard play and Julius Randle was basically hit list target number one, right? All
Yeah.
series long.
Mm-hmm.
Now they are fleshed out at the guard position. They have guys that provide different things, both offensively and defensively. And I think the versatility they have in that backcourt gives them a different wrinkle that makes them a lot scarier of a Knicks team than we've seen in the years past, more in particular that last time we saw them in the postseason.
Yeah, for sure. And we're gonna definitely get into what the Knicks can bring to the postseason next week in our playoff preview. But man, I mean it's not saying much, but this is probably the best Knicks point guard group of the last like 30 years. They have not had luck trying to figure out that guard position. And it didn't just like go back to the last few seasons. This has gone back for decades. I'm glad that they're finally figuring this out. Moving on to the next award, we are going to be talking about the MIP Most Improved Player Award. All three of these guys, man, all of them first time All Stars. We have a good group of candidates here today. For MIP, we have Tyrese Halliburton of the Indiana Pacers, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Lauri Markkanen of the Utah Jazz. Jay, your thoughts on the candidates?
This might be the hardest one outside of MVP, bro. this might be the hardest one outside of MVP, man. Shout out my boy Lauri. I wish he could have done this to the Bulls jersey, but nonetheless, they had to let him spread his wings and fly. And after two more stops, in terms of just being able to get different looks at what his position could look like in the league, the Utah Jazz has definitely become a serious home for him. He's been able to become a number one option. Jumping into the All-Star level that he's been able to play at throughout this season is big time. And he's going to be a guy that's going to have one of the most efficient 20-plus point per game seasons of all time, which is kind of an insane thing as well to, be able to have that on his resume as still a legitimately young player in this league. Tyrese Halliburton, I think a lot of people expected him to pop in this first real year, real full season with the Indiana Pacers. But the fact that it's night and day in terms of how the Indiana Pacers play when he's on the floor versus off. I mean, before his injury, we were like, yo, are the Indiana Pacers like sneakily trying to make it for the playoffs? Tyrese Halliburton gets injured. They jump off a cliff and probably dive under the crevices of the earth, man. I mean, this is the team that completely lost their way as soon as Tyrese Halliburton left the floor. And I think there's some insane starting five lineup for the Indiana Pacers that's like one of the best starting fives offensively in like the entire NBA. To say that the Indiana Pacers have one of the best potential five-man units offensively in the league That's a crazy statement to say out loud. Now, pair that with the fact that we know that Tyrese Halliburton is the driving force of that. Definitely got to give his credence. And then, do we really have to spend too much time on how insane this year has been for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
Yeah.
Top 5 scorer in the NBA, providing as the lead guy for a team that could end up making the postseason this year in an unexpected year for them. The dude took a leap that took him from being a guy who maybe is considered a fringe all-star at the highest peak for most people to this year TV first
All
team All NBA
NBA.
low key.
All NBA for sure.
You know
First
what I
team was a
mean?
question. Yeah.
First team is at least up for question. I think that's one of those things that definitely makes it even more interesting because it's one thing to go from, we talked about this with John Morant
Yeah.
once upon a time. It's one thing to go from being a guy that's fringe all-star to jumping into that real all-star caliber conversation. It's another thing to go from being on the outside looking in of being viewed as a fringe all-star to jumping into being a dude who is potentially going to be like a first team All NBA guard. And kind of similar circumstances can be said for De'Aaron Fox, who didn't make our top 3 in this grouping.
Yeah.
But I just think that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has done it much more impressively. He's providing the defense to a certain degree as well, which I also
Yeah.
think is an interesting factor to kind of to tack on the top of this. And he's just having an amazing year, bro. He's having an amazing year.
Yeah, all three of these guys are. And what's crazy about all three of these candidates is that they're all like helping their teams like in a positive way, in a lot of ways, a very surprising way, as a number one option. Tyrese Halliburton coming in, being the lead guard for this team, and them showing flashes that they can be a play-in slash playoff team this early into the rebuild has shown that Tyrese Halliburton is like one of the top point guards in the league, and it's been just like really fun to watch. Laurie, man, I mean, who the heck saw this coming? Who saw this?
For real.
Who saw this coming? That the Utah Jazz were going to be this competent, and Lauri Markkanen is the catalyst of all this? What? He's just been absolutely insane, like very worthy first-time All-Star, first-time All-Star, and also All-Star starter too. Goodness gracious for Lauri Markkanen there. He's just been like, what do you call it? Set free. He's been able to let his like wings fly or whatever. He's been doing that to a very good degree. And man, I mean, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's probably the number one, like besides DeMar DeRozan, like the number one like fan favorite on this podcast, man. We both absolutely love this guy. And the fact that he is like going to conversations for not like from fringe all-star to possibly a top 10 player in the league, like
Right?
possibly, like it's insane the amount of jump he is. And I think like his case especially very much resembles the Ja case from last year, where you saw, he could be like a top guard in this league, but when you actually see it and the jump from him being not even an all-star to where he is right now just seems so insane. And he has been such a joy to watch this year, one of the most entertaining guys to watch in this league. It's a tough choice, man, like you mentioned off the rip. But Jay, who is ultimately your winner for most improved player?
I think it's SGA, bro. I think all of these guys made elite level jumps. The fact that all of these guys are coming off of all of these guys, all three of these guys, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Tyrese Halliburton, and Lauri Markkanen, we're talking about 3 first-time All-Stars. So they all made significant jumps. So that's what made it really hard. But then I think the differentiator is just the fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has just done so much in terms of reinvigorating this Thunder team. And this is a Thunder team that's been punching above their weight all season. And the fact that they're even in the playoff conversation in any regards this late into the year is big time for a league that is trying to divert away from the tanking era, right? A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people come into this season looking at Oklahoma City, especially after Chet Holmgren went down and went, oh man, OKC's going back into tank commander mode. And everybody views the Oklahoma City Thunder as going under this weird process, kind of like the 76ers did. It was just a couple of seasons ago in the bubble that this OKC Thunder team was sneakily in the postseason, right? With Danilo Gallinari, CP3, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Dennis Schroeder, Groove. This team has actually been putting themselves together a lot quicker and a lot better than we've given them credit for. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has taken that. He hasn't complained. He hasn't let the rumors of people talking about him maybe wanting out if this team continues to bottom out of the league, right? Different things like that. He's let all of that stuff sit to the wayside, and he's embraced the environment as the lead guy for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And he's established a culture of development, bro. Jalen Williams developing in front of our very eyes. Josh Giddey got better and better throughout this season. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander helped him feel even more empowered, along with Coach Mike Daigneault. You even look at guys like Isaiah Joe, who's like the best three-point shooter
Yeah.
in the league, by the way, this season, insanely enough. Like, this guy just exudes so much confidence, and by doing so, I think it trickles down throughout the rest of the roster, and it's empowered them to play at a really high level, to the point that TV, did we not even, we even forgot to mention, the Oklahoma City Thunder are like a top 10 defense for no reason this year. For no reason at all. The personnel doesn't speak to them being a top 10 defense. And honestly, the only thing that screams that they should be that way is that they're one of the youngest teams in the league. And if they play with a motor like one of the youngest teams in the league, then they're a dangerous squad, because for 82 games, they're going to hawk you down. And so far this season, that's exactly what they've done.
Yeah, it's you make such a good point in terms of the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander thing. I mean, that jump that he's been able to do, and also just keeping Oklahoma City Thunder in the race. They are still the number 10 seed, has been impressive all year long. And I'm just glad that the Thunder didn't say, you know what, let's put this down. We have to try and get another pick. No. They let them play. They let them try and fight for the spot. And it's just going to create just such a better culture for when Chet Holmgren is available as a new piece for this team. It's just going to create just a whole like better vibe with years going forward, whether they make it or not. I think that's just like a very successful season nonetheless. Shai definitely deserves the love. Jay, even at this point, I still am kind of differing between two. It's really, really tough. I'm going to go Lauri Markkanen. I'm going to go Lauri. I am going Lauri Markkanen as my winner for this. Is it a lot to do with this, the surprise factor? Hell yeah, it does. I mean, like, come on now. Who thought that Lauri Markkanen was going to be a 26 point per game scorer, one of the top guys in the league in terms of true shooting percentage, over 40, like, who expected any of this from this guy who couldn't really find a role with the Chicago Bulls, was playing small forward for the Cleveland Cavaliers last year, just trying to find his way here, becomes the number one option, and then is almost basically 50% from the field, almost like 40% from three, almost 90% of the line. Like, this guy is like just like underneath all of those to be at near the 50-40-90 club. This is Lauri Markkanen we're talking about. If you told me that this is the type of season he was going to have before the season, I would thought that that person was crazy. But he is proving that he is able to do it when put into the right system. Will Hardy has used him to his fullest extent, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And it's not like he's getting like empty numbers on a bad team. The Jazz were in the race for like the longest time. Sure, they might be out of the race right now, but the Jazz were in the play-in/playoff race for the longest time. It was only until they traded away Mike Conley when they're like, okay, maybe it's time to maybe start tagging out, because what's really the point of all this? But Lauri Markkanen has been fighting out this entire season. I want to show him his flowers. I mean, there is no way that we thought that he was going to have some sort of season like this, and the fact that we know that he's capable of doing this for the duration of the season on a solid team. Whether he stays with the Jazz in the coming years, or whether a team picks him up to be a second or third option, Lauri Markkanen potentially being that for a good team, who knows? But the fact he's been able to show this in a time where we did not expect this at all. I mean, we kind of saw that Shai had that potential, maybe not to this extent, but we saw that Shai could be an all-star level player. Same thing with Tyrese Halliburton. But come on, man, no one saw this with Lauri Markkanen, and I think that sort of factor, in terms of most improved, is the type of case that I like for this award. I mean, you can obviously make a huge case for Shai as well, as you mentioned, but I got to stick with Lauri, man. I know he's one of your old Chicago guys, but man, I've just been an absolute amazement on how he's been able to play this season.
I mean, I can't poo-poo his season. Unfortunately, Tyrese Halliburton is the guy that's not going to get a ton of love on this podcast, and it's just out of the fact that he missed so much time with the injury. Yeah. But I also think it's just the fact that when it comes to second-year guys, or I guess in this case, it's not really second year, but in the sense of in this role, this was his first real chance at being able to embrace the lead guard potential that we kind of envisioned towards the back end of last year after the trade between Indiana and the Sacramento Kings. So he's kind of the guy that, although his improvement is so significant to the point that we have to acknowledge it in the MIP race, he's kind of the guy that of this group we expected the jump the most from. Maybe not the jump that he reached, but we expected a leap nonetheless. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And He's not going to be getting much love here, but we're not going to like take away from his like fantastic season as well. It's just that Laurie Markin and Chigo Alexander, I mean, those two guys just like really put their stamp on the league on like their impact this season. You can go with either one of them. Me and Jay differ here, but I wouldn't be mad with any of those picks for MIP. Moving on to the next award. We're gonna be moving on to actually one of the the newest award coming for this year, also known as the Clutch Player of the Year award. I mean, I'm not even sure what really the criteria for this is. I think I have an idea, but we really don't know how like this thing's gonna go. I feel like there's an obvious winner. Here are our candidates. We have Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks, DeMar DeRozan of the Chicago Bulls, and De'Aaron Fox of the Sacramento Kings. Jay, I mean, how do you want to go about this? How do you feel about these candidates?
This is the weirdest award because I feel like it's just one of those things that's just strictly based on perception. Or I guess
Yeah.
if you're just one of those stat nerds that really likes looking at clutch stats, which I'm doing right now.
Oh, same here, man. Same here, man.
Because look, man, that's the only. I mean, to be real, that's the only way you can truly contextualize it is just by looking at what do they do in the clutch. How do they provide? In moments where their team needs them the most in the final 2 to 3 minutes of a game. Or I think you could just do something as simple as, I guess, watch the games and see who has the most outstanding moments. But one of the things that's kind of like most understood to me is that this is an award where legitimately the guys that can backpack a team in specific moments where they need to be called upon. That's kind of what this award is about. I don't know if it's really an award worth giving a ton of merit to the point of a trophy,
Yeah.
but hey, man, if we're gonna do it, there are some decent candidates nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, at least in terms of this season, I mean, DeMar DeRozan has had like this kind of like moniker of him like being able to perform in the clutch since his days with the Toronto Raptors, and especially last year with the Chicago Bulls. I mean, if this was an award for last year, DeMar DeRozan would have 100% won it.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. It just is it different this year because the Bulls have not been as productive. That's definitely a case, but he is still putting up some great numbers in the clutch. As I'm looking over here, 4 points a game, 47% from the field. Especially with these other two candidates, I mean, De'Aaron Fox has just shown just like on a night to night basis that he could just like put the ball in his hands and he's just gonna make the right decision late in games. You just completely trust that. And then Jalen Brunson, he just the type of player where you same thing. You keep the ball in his hands, you know that he's gonna make the right decision. And when it comes to making a shot, you know he'll be able to make it down. I mean, like you said, I don't really know like how much to really go off of this, how much we have to really look into it, or if it deserves much merit. But it's an award nonetheless, and we're gonna pick a winner for this. Jay, who is your winner for the clutch player of the year?
I've got De'Aaron Fox, man. I think that his ability to close games has just been one of the most notable things about the Sacramento Kings. I think
Yeah.
despite the fact that DeMontis Sabonis has been so good, it cannot be overshadowed that De'Aaron Fox has been an all NBA caliber guard this year and definitely still should be considered as the best player on Sacramento. I think that DeMontis helps them work, but De'Aaron makes them run. And those are two totally different things when you talk about what the Sacramento Kings have been able to do this season. And his efficiency across the board, when you talk about what he's been able to do in the clutch, stands out significantly. I mean, effective field goal percentage alone is up to 53%.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, he's one of the best producers in the clutch area. And the Sacramento Kings, it kind of shows this season in comparison to last season. One of the biggest things that kind of was an issue for the Sacramento Kings was their inability to close games. God, I sound like I'm talking about the Bulls in reverse now because the Bulls
Yeah.
Bulls can't close games to save their life this season compared to last year. They were shutting the door on folks in the last 5 to 10 seconds of games. This year, it's
Yeah.
kind of a completely different reverse. I think with the Sacramento Kings, they were a team that kind of was pretty feisty for the most part last season, but never seemed to kind of really be able to hold on to a lead. And this year, they're scrapping and clawing as a team that isn't that great defensively. But if you need them to get baskets, they can shoot with the best of them. We saw that in that
Mm-hmm.
game versus the LA Clippers where they put up, what, like 170 or something crazy like that? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you know what I mean? They can definitely score with the best of them. And you throw on top of that De'Aaron Fox has just been one of the best closers in the league. He's had more than a handful of walk-offs this year. It's De'Aaron, I think.
No argument against it here. I'm going De'Aaron Fox as well. I think what's just most impressive is that when it comes to like these late game situations, his game just improves, which is something we look at. 60% from the field in terms of just in clutch time. His 3-point percentage goes up and during clutch time as well. The league leader in clutch points per game. It should be pretty easy here. De'Aaron Fox is the clear winner. I don't know. I guess like if we look at those stats, that's basically the only way you could look at it. But at least with this year, you could just make it's like pretty easy that it's De'Aaron Fox, and there really is no other argument for for the other guys. I mean, unfortunately for DeMar DeRozan, he's scoring in the clutch. Does it result to wins? As you mentioned, you're a Bulls fan. You've witnessed a lot of leads game blown this year. So yeah, I mean, Jalen Brunson, I guess he's been doing great as well. But yeah, De'Aaron Fox is the clear winner, 100%. We got two more awards coming up here, and then we have the final award before the big boy. We have the Coach of the Year award. It's definitely like it's either best record in the league sort of award or most surprising team in the league sort of award. It's really hard to kind of put into like what the coaches actually do, but at the end of the day, we have some great candidates here for you. We have Taylor Jenkins of the Memphis Grizzlies, Joe Mazzulla of the Boston Celtics, and Mike Brown of the Sacramento Kings. Jay, how are you feeling about these three candidates?
Stevie, I'm sorry. This actually might be the easiest one for me personally. Now, This is not to toot my own horn, but I'm gonna step on the pedestal for a second because I gotta get this one off.
Yeah.
Anybody who has been listening to the podcast from the very first episode, anybody who has listened to, shout out my boys from the Baller Island podcast before the season started, or checked out my TikTok before the season started when I was originally recording the Knockdown J podcast. One of the clips that went viral, one of the takes that I was saying on podcast after podcast, to whether it was my own or whether I was going on somebody else's platform, I kept telling people, man, the Kings made some pretty solid pickups this offseason, huh? Kevin Huerter, they get Malik Monk, who's a former teammate of De'Aaron Fox. Sabonis gets a full season next to this team. They get guys like Dellavedova just as a hard-nosed guy in the locker room. They've got a lot better presence. They get a NBA-ready guy in Keegan Murray in the past. And you get the Golden State Warriors defensive coordinator / prodigy in Mike Brown, who's been underneath of a championship culture for the last couple of seasons and now brings that ideology over to the Sacramento Kings, who were stuck with Luke Walton Jr. as their coach for the last couple of seasons. Get Luke out of here, man. First real season with a real solid coach who knows what he's doing in Mike Brown. And you see the difference. You've got all-star caliber players. You've got a legit team built around those guys. They've needed the head of the snake in Mike Brown, or just in general, a solid head coach. And it's made things much more enjoyable to watch when you talk about the Sacramento Kings. And let's just keep it a being as it is. They're breaking the streak. They broke the streak. The streak is broken.
Yeah.
They sealed their spot in the playoffs. They're a team that could win 50 games in the Western Conference this season. And they are arguably, if the season ended today, they are the best offensive team in terms of offensive rating. Not just this season. Not just last season. Not just the season before that. Of all time, TV.
Yeah.
Of all time. There's no doubt in my mind. Mike Brown came over to this team with a defensive background. That has not reflected in terms of this team. I will admit that much. But he has instilled a level of confidence within this team that has allowed the guys that are part of this squad to play up to their potential offensively, and they've become one of the best producing offenses of all time in the wake of that. When you have a coach that understands his players and brings out the best of them, this kind of stuff happens. And now we've got the third seed in the NBA in the Sacramento Kings, coming off of being the fourth team drafting in the lottery this past summer.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we haven't said our winners yet, but I have a feeling where I know where you're going with this award. Before I get to my winner, I'm gonna just shout out the other two guys in this category. Taylor Jenkins. There's been just so much controversy surrounding the Memphis Grizzlies this year, and just like last season when John Morant missed a good amount of time, he's still been able to ride the ship. Another season where they're probably going to finish with over 50 wins. Very, very impressive. He has shown that he has been one of the most consistent coaches in the league, and has shown that he is able to produce a very good offensive and defensive team on the court, leading especially with defense, number one defensive rating in the entire league. Joe Mazzulla, you can make a similar argument for him. There was a lot of controversy surrounding the Boston Celtics before the season, and they had to get rid of Ime Udoka at the last minute, throwing Joe Mazzulla, and he has been able to still keep the Boston Celtics afloat. Maybe not the same sort of defensive identity as Ime Udoka has put onto his team last year, but in terms of offensive production, he is up there. I mean, still second in the league in offensive rating with 118.8, and still a pretty solid defense as well. Joe Mazzulla has like stepped into this role and has shown that he is still able to lead this Boston Celtics team to big things. But I'm gonna go. I'm with you here. Winner Mike Brown. We've made fun of the Kings for
Yeah,
years.
man.
They've been the biggest running joke in the NBA for the past almost 2 decades at this point. He has turned this team around. And sure, has the defense improved? No, but that doesn't matter when you're when you're scoring this many points in a game. When you have Sabonis being Jokic Jr. And you have De'Aaron Fox playing at the level at the level he is playing right now, with production from so many other guys as well, and Kevin Herter, who has been a great addition, Malik Monk, who has been a fantastic addition. The culture's just turned around for the Sacramento Kings, and it's just fantastic to see because they have been the biggest running joke for the longest time, and Mike Brown has turned them into a respectable, a legitimate team. And maybe that type of thing is just the biggest difference in terms of turning an organization around, just getting a solid head coach, and he has made the biggest difference out of all of them. I'll let you like finish it off, but with the way you're speaking, you definitely have Mike Brown as well as your winner.
Yeah, man. Mike Brown is definitely my guy. Obviously, like I said, just spoke very highly of
Yeah,
him. But because I spoke so highly of him, I just want to give a shout out to the two guys that were definitely
yeah,
honorable mentions for me. The first one was Jacques Vaughn. I think if we're going to talk about turmoil in
yeah.
terms of rosters, the Brooklyn Nets are definitely at the top of that
Fair.
list. And this man was thrown in this dude was thrown in the fire, right? And this is
Yeah.
a dude who's been able to keep this team afloat in the 6th seed. Granted, there's still potentially a chance they could end up in the play-in tournament, but I think they're pretty solidly sitting in that 6th spot in the Eastern Conference. That's a team that was able to stay afloat despite watching not one, but two All-Stars go out the door at the NBA trade deadline, something we've never really seen happen in quite a long time. Maybe not if ever. Definitely not seen a guy of Kevin Durant's caliber traded, let alone the fact that Kyrie Irving went first. You throw on top of that the fact that their third best player, in theory, was supposed to be Ben Simmons, and he's either been trash or mentally already in Shanghai, as far as we're concerned. So, with that being the case, that's even more obstacles to overcome. And eventually, Ben Simmons got shut down, but he's been able to make the most out of the season. Nicholas Claxton was playing himself into Defensive Player of the Year conversations earlier this year. Mikal Bridges has been unlocked in this post trade deadline portion of the season with the Brooklyn Nets. Partially, I think, because of the fact that Jacques Vaughn has truly empowered him to take a lead role if he's going to have to be that talent for this team. And I think across the board, he's just managed this team very well for a team that hasn't been managed very well for the last couple of
Yeah.
seasons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the other guy that comes up, I brought this up to you on the pre-show before we actually started recording. And I think it's Mike Daigneault for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's another guy that was definitely an audible mention for me because everybody across the board is playing well for the Oklahoma City Thunder in their own way. Everybody is improving. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander obviously took a significant, a tremendous leap. Josh Giddey is playing much better this season. Jalen Williams, J-Dub, has only gotten better over the course of the season. Like I said beforehand, Isaiah Joe has significantly stepped up. I think that Luguentz Dort is being once again kind of regarded as one of the better perimeter defenders in the league after kind of having a weird 2-year lull period after the bubble where people were kind of like, he's just a
Yeah.
burly body that can, that can body up, but he's built like a
Yeah.
linebacker. So of course he's good at defense. Like, no, Luguentz Dort is definitely an elite level defender for this team. There's a lot of internal development on this Oklahoma City Thunder squad, and Mike Daigneault has a lot to do with that in terms of just empowering his guys. And there's a handful of guys I didn't even name that are just playing a lot better and playing a lot more comfortable. And you can tell that's because of the coaching that they're being given in a way that's letting them know, hey, look, guys, we're playing with house money here as a young group, the youngest team in the NBA. We have a guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who is the spearhead of our team, and he's a guy that wants to be here for the long haul and build a true franchise from the ground up. If you guys follow suit, we can have a legitimate core for the long term. And this season is a very big stepping stone for them in terms of moving into being that kind of team because here they are now getting Chet Holmgren next season. And right now, with where they're positioned, even if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to be in contention for potentially a lottery pick, maybe, depending on where things land. And if they do make the playoffs, that's really good postseason experience for a young squad that's already knocking on the door 2 seasons after everybody was like, the taking's about to come after CP3 was traded.
Yeah, nice shout out to those two guys as well. They definitely deserve some love. But at least around here, it's pretty clear the winner is going to be Mike Brown. Hopefully, the NBA does show him some love and give him the award as well because he highly, highly deserves it. But Jay, here we go. We have reached the final award of this. We have reached the granddaddy of the NBA awards, the MVP. Yes, yes, yes. The discussion that we've had all year round is finally culminating in this episode. We know who the three candidates are. Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks, Joel Embiid of the Philadelphia 76ers, and Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets up for his third straight MVP. Jay, we've had discussions for weeks on end. You know what? Let's not even discuss the candidates. Let's get right into it. Who is your winner for MVP?
Ooh, dude. I told you pre-show it was gonna come down to the buzzer, bro. I think it's still Yoke, man.
You so got Jokic. Wow.
I think it's still Yoke. And maybe this is just me resting on my laurels here. Maybe this is also me doing the Kendrick Perkins and validating the belief that maybe, just maybe, Joel Embiid was ducking that smoke a couple of games ago where they were going to have another head-to-head matchup. Maybe it's also the fact that Giannis Antetokounmpo just outplayed Joel Embiid just the other night in their head-to-head matchup.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the fact that every player on the Denver Nuggets is having like a career season on the back of Nikola Jokic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all bad.
There's a lot of very variables here, man, but I just think that Yoke has been the best offensive player in the league by far this season, and he's not a detriment defensively. They've been the number one seed for a majority of the year. They've held the fort down. A lot of people are trying to stir up controversy because the Nuggets have taken taken a step back, lulling these last couple of games or so. But we also understand that they've had the one seed locked up for like a month now. You know what I mean? So you can also kind of factor it as them kind of slowing down at the fact that they've been resting guys like Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, for example, which is probably a smart thing to do when you're talking about a postseason that's going to be as erratic as this one, especially in the Western Conference. So, look, man, this is me sticking with my OG pick from the preseason. This might also be me trying my best to avoid the recency bias of all the hype around the late Joel Embiid push for his hype train. I'm going to stick with Yoke, man. I'm going to stick with Yoke.
Oh, man, this is tough. This is really tough. I'm going to tell you right now, I've eliminated Giannis from the conversation. It's not that he hasn't been absolutely phenomenal. He has been. But it's like the impact that he has had. Maybe he's played a little bit less games as well, but actually, I can't even make that argument, man. He's still on the best team in the league. It's so tough. It's so tough. I'm going to give it to Embiid. I'm giving it to Embiid. I'm giving it to Embiid. I have been on the Jokic train for like 90% of the season.
Yeah.
90% of the season. But when we look at the last couple of years, especially with the Embiid versus Jokic MVP duel, which has been going on for the past couple of seasons now, what are some of the things that Nikola Jokic had above him? Yes, the offensive stats. Yes, yes, kind of like the near triple-double like numbers and stuff like that. In terms of games played this year, Embiid is only 3 behind. He's played a good chunk of the season. Nikola Jokic has actually missed some time. Whether it's due rest or not, he has been missing some time. The Philadelphia 76ers, although they're not number one in their conference, they're only 1 game behind the Denver Nuggets. And I can't take away from just the dominance that Joel Embiid has just showcased this season all year long, leading the league in scoring at 33 points per game. double-digit rebounder, 10 rebounds per game. And even though we don't talk about him for defensive player of the year, still one of the league's most intimidating shot blockers, one of the most intimidating presences inside. Um, and his ability to just not only take over games on both sides of the floor, but just making make us like a statement, like whether like in terms of like big time battles, in terms of big time appearances. I mean, you could just like compare to Jokic. Jokic, of course, you made the argument. Everyone on this team feels like they're having a career year around him, and that is a completely valid point. But Joel Embiid is not a neutral on the defensive end. He is a plus when you have him on the court. His offensive game is still there. Yes, he's not the passer that Jokic is, but he is the most dominant inside presence we have next to Giannis Antetokounmpo in this league today. You mix in that, you mix in with the great record that the 76ers had this year, the fact that he has been pretty durable this entire season. This is the year where I think he finally wins it. This is the year. It could still go to Jokic. Again, up to this point in the podcast, I know when we were creeping up in the MVP, I'm like, do I want to flip? I really think there's a chance for me to flip here, but I'm not. I'm sticking with Joel Embiid. He's going to be a 2-time scoring champ after this season as well. His dominance, man, his dominance just throughout this year, and the fact that like them and the Nuggets in terms of like just team success have been neck and neck. Joel Embiid for me gets the edge just slightly. Does that also include the fact that Jokic's stat line doesn't look as great anymore because it's 9.9 assists instead of 10 assists too? Potentially, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm just really just fooling around with you guys. But I still think Joel Embiid, very narrow margin, I have him winning MVP.
Man, this has been a Styles makes fights kind of like argument all season for the last 2 seasons, man. It really just depends on what you like, man. Joel Embiid, when you look at it on the surface, if you look at it on the surface, he just looks more dominant. He plays more dominant. The physicality that he also provides just makes them a much scarier team. Like you said, obviously from a defensive standpoint, you can make the similar argument with Joel Embiid as we made with Jaren Jackson Jr. earlier, right? There's not a ton of defensive personnel around Joel Embiid, yet the Philadelphia 76ers are one of the better defenses in the league. That does have a lot to do with him being a rim defender and an elite rim defender, and a big time shot blocker as well. And then, like you said, what he's able to provide offensively is, I mean, it's a super net plus when you talk about what he already gives you on the other end of the court. It's just, like I said, when it comes to Yoke, man, like it's just, with Yoke, it's just the fact that he is so much of an offensive engine. I just think when you say most valuable player, you talk about the ability for a team to function without you on the floor. If guys are having career seasons, this isn't they look like they're having career seasons. No. Aaron Gordon having a career year. KCP is shooting the lights out at a career clip. You got dudes like Michael Porter Jr. walking into like 18 to 20 games, 20 points a night, like in his sleep, basically. Bruce Brown and Christian Brown, for example, those two guys are playing out of their mind despite basically being undersized for where they're playing positionally, bro. Like they're just having way too many guys clicking at the same time that weren't clicking like this before Yoke teed off.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's been doing this for 3 seasons. So I understand there's a part of you that says, well, Aaron Gordon's been on this team for a couple of seasons. What happened to it? Where did this come from? Well, guess what? Aaron Gordon's also developed his game around understanding that the MVP is going to get him the rock in the right spot. So he can be more aggressive and should be more aggressive. Michael Porter Jr. hasn't been healthy. Now he's healthy. And the Yoke man's getting him the ball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? KCP has never played. I hate to say this because it sounds disrespectful to LeBron James, but I don't think that KCP's played with a passer like Nikola Jokic before.
Yeah.
Right? And it changes the dynamic entirely. So, and Giannis feels like he's getting disrespected in this convo, and it's like, we're not trying to. You play on the best team in the league. You snuck up on the Boston Celtics, who were running away with the East in the beginning of the league, at the beginning of the year. Now you're the top team in the Eastern Conference. Now you're the top team in the entire NBA record-wise. Yeah. You're one of the best defenders in the league on one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, and you're still one of the better scorers in terms of PPG.
Yeah.
Somehow he's left out, and I guess it's just because the free throw numbers are looking a little ugly, and he's settling for more catch and shoot jumpers.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
It's so hard because if someone even said that Giannis deserves MVP, I can't hate that either. I really can't hate on that argument as well. But oh man, it hurt not picking Jokic. I really was on that Jokic wagon for a while, but the narrative, the whole story with the 76ers, Embiid and his dominance, it just feels like everything is lined up. Finally, finally for Joel Embiid to win the MVP award. Even until now, I'm not like the most confident in that pick. Jokic is still like right there for me, but it could go either way. Let us know down below what you guys think. I mean, this MVP discussion has been going on for like probably since honestly the turn of the year. 2023 has been like basically dominated by the MVP discussion
Pretty
throughout,
much.
basically. So yeah, it's been insane. Let us know who you got for any of these awards actually, but especially the MVP award. We're finally at the end of the season. It's time to have that discussion. Who is the MVP? Is it Jokic? Is it Giannis? Is it Joel Embiid? Me and Jay differ, but let us know what you guys have down below. Man, it was a tough. It was very tough. We are an hour and a half into this episode, which means unfortunately we're gonna have to cut out the draft, but it's fun. We had some great awards talk, which is always good. We might do the same thing next week because of the playoff preview as well. But we're gonna end this. But we reached the end of the episode, which means time for another NBA quiz with your host TV and your contestant Jay. And this quiz has evolved revolves around the MVP actually. Jay, I'm gonna need you to name me the 10 seasons since the year 2000, or no, the player in the year,
Oh,
sorry, the player in the year,
whew.
um with the lowest points per game for an MVP since the year 2000. There's
There's
the top 10 like lowest points per game seasons. If you can name me the players, that's fine. I'll tell you the years because a couple of them have won obviously multiple MVPs. But if you can name me the player that you think will make the list, lowest points per game for MVP since the year 2000, I'll tell you which years that they made it on. But basically, yeah, throw it at me. Who's in this top 10 that you believe is there?
Dirk.
Dirk is number six in terms of like least points per game since 2000. He averaged 24.6 that season when he won his MVP, year
Progress.
2007.
Tim Duncan.
Tim Duncan is on this list twice, actually. In his 03 season, he averaged 23.3 points per game, third at least for an MVP. And then he's also eighth when he averaged 25.5 in the year 2002.
All right, we're cooking with grease so far.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, now we got to start really getting into the MVP bag. This might be wrong, but I'm just going out on a flyer just because it was more of a narrative MVP that year to an extent. But like Steve Nash.
Both of his MVP seasons actually are 1 and 2 on this list for lowest points per game. In 2005, he averaged 15.5 points per game as an MVP, 15.5, and in 2006 he averaged 18.5, which is higher, but still significantly less than number 3, which is Tim Duncan at 23.3. So yeah, he occupies the top 2 spots for this list. You're missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players.
And this is since the year 2000, you said?
Since the year 2000, yes.
All right. That's okay. So we can get rid of some of the easy names. I don't think Steph. I don't think James. I don't think Russell.
Well, throw out some names. I mean, they've had multiple MVP years. I mean, I say that these are the lowest points per game for MVP, but these are still kind of ridiculous, like scoring.
Yeah,
seasons.
good point though. Good point. Does Braun have any of them?
Number 10. Number 10.
I was gonna say he feels borderline.
Yeah. He's in 2013 he averaged 26.8 points per game, which is 10th lowest since the year 2000. Okay. We are missing 4 more players.
Is Jokic on this list at all?
Number 9, 26.4 points per game in his first MVP season, and in 2021 he is number 9. You're missing 1, 2, 3 more players.
That is bonkers.
One of the guys you're not going to expect to be on this list, but he is, just because of the way that he plays. You're surprised that he's kind of this low.
I felt this coming. Okay, I don't even know if this is like truly right or anything. Like, is Kobe on this list?
Who? Kobe?
Yeah.
No, he is not on this list.
I was about to say he was the shot chucker that I was like maybe, but like, oh man, holy cow.
I think you mentioned him actually earlier when you're thinking of guys that like you're like definitely he hasn't done it.
Really?
Yeah.
So like James Harden?
Nope, not him. It's another current. There's two current players here, but one is still like an MVP caliber player for sure.
Steph?
Steph, fourth.
Okay, I gotta hear
No,
this.
the 2015 season, his first MVP year.
Yeah.
23.8 points per game. 23.8. That just kind of shows you how much the NBA has, the scoring output has
tweaked
raised.
out.
Just completely tweaked out. 23.8 points per game. He averaged in that year. I mean, yeah, it's just absolutely crazy. Like I'm looking at the top 25 right now. Like that's Jalen Green, basically close to Jalen Green.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm sitting here like, dude, there's like, oh my god, 23 PPG for Steph feels like mad, like
mad low. Yeah, that's
oh.
crazy. Two more players on this list. We have one big man and one guard.
We're out of current.
We have one current guy, but he's like, I don't think he's really in the rotation of his team anymore, unfortunately.
I think I know who it is, and I don't like it. Is it Derrick Rose?
It is Derrick Rose.
Oh.
Number 7 on this list, and in his MVP season averaged a flat 25 points per game. Still a very good year, but again, it's just, it's the top 10. It's an MVP season nonetheless. But yeah, Derrick Rose number. The last guy has been out of the league for a while, but one of the best kind of interior defenders of his time. Won a championship after he moved from this team, but he was most dominant on the team he won the MVP with. He's how can I say it? He is known for a very certain scream after winning the championship.
Wow. Okay, so Kevin Garnett's on this list.
Kevin Garnett, number 5, and his one MVP season averaged 24.2 points per game. Yeah, I mean the Timberwolves, man. Those Timberwolves teams were not the best. Big carry job on KG there, but yeah, he is number 5 on this list in terms of lowest points per game. So yeah, I mean, number 3 all time, like number 3 lowest was like since 2000 was 23 points per game. That says a lot.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I know. Obviously, the Nash seasons are kind of the omissions because his passing was great. He had the best team in the league. But yeah, those are the top 10 lowest points per game seasons for an MVP since 2000. If Jokic were to win, though, that would move LeBron off the list, and Jokic would have number 8 and he would have number 7 and number 10 on the list for lowest points per game MVP season since 2000. So if he does win this year, he has another entry on this list. But yeah, another great quiz. Let us know down below what you guys for any other quizzes and all that other stuff. We'd like to get some more suggestions. But man, Jay, we've reached another end of it. So this was a very, very high octane, like a lot of different emotions coming through with this episode.
Yeah, man. I mean, since we're about to close out the episode, I'm just gonna put it like this. If you thought this episode was dense, wait till the playoff preview. This is me telling you to make sure to tune in, because look, if you thought this episode was dense, I'm doing the deep dives for this playoff preview. So when the time comes next week, after the dust settles, TV, we got to decide whether or not we're going to wait to record until after the play-in tournament. That's an interesting question, too.
Well,
we'll figure that out.
We'll figure that out. But yeah, I think we'll see. But at the end of the day, we're going to get a playoff episode for you. Yeah. Maybe we might, honestly, we might do, the whole thing. We might actually, depending on how long we go, we might divide it up into 2 episodes, depending. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see about that too. But we're gonna definitely have all the teams covered before the playoffs start next week. So be a lookout for that. It's gonna be another fantastic episode, man. That's gonna be something really crazy for sure.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, this is another end of a great episode. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Remember to check out our personal socials down below in the description. Remember to follow the Hit Your Free Throws podcast on TikTok and Instagram for awesome daily content. Subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube, and subscribe. Leave a review if you're on any of the podcast networks. We highly appreciate all of you and all your guys' support. But this is where we're going to end today's episode. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Hope you all have a fantastic day, evening, whatever it is. We really appreciate y'all. This is Jay. Sorry, that's Jay. This is TV signing out. Have an awesome day, guys. Peace.
Peace.